Good morning, Jai Hind. Welcome to our fifth session. I am Satya Pulkuri, your host for this session. I am a research associate for Indic Researchers Forum. Our fifth session is on decoding the Northeast insurgency. So, without any further ado, I extend a warm welcome to our session chair, Major General Rakesh Baduria. Major General Rakesh Baduria, Visist Seva Medal, is presently head of Center for Strategic Studies and Simulations at United Service Institution of India, New Delhi. He regularly conducts strategic gaming exercises for National Defense College, Army War College, and Indian Foreign Service Institute. He retired from the faculty of National Defense College, New Delhi in February 2016 after serving in the Indian Army for 36 years. General has a vast experience in anti-terrorism operations, both at policy formulation and execution level. He has commanded a mountain division and brigade. He has held many prestigious staff appointments at command and army headquarters. He has the unique experience of raising two large formations, that is, division and mountain corps. He holds a Master of Philosophy degree in National Security and Strategic Studies from Madras University, India. He has attended a course on politics and strategic affairs in Brazil. General has deep interests in researching and writing on security environment in Indo-Pacific region, particularly in South Asia. Now, let's welcome our speakers. We have Harjit Sandhu, retired IPS, Lieutenant General Shaukin Chauhan sir, Ramid Niranjan Desai ma'am, Brigadier Rahul Bhosle sir, Gurdiyal Singh Pandir, retired IPS officer. Now I request our session chair to please take over the floor. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome you all to this session on decoding the Northeast insurgencies. Like what Vice Admiral Deshpande was saying, that this is part of that half front, what he talked about, and what we normally hear in the this statement by the previous CDS, right? Besides the Kashmir, the left-wing extremism, insurgencies in Northeast can become part of that half front should our neighbors decide to ferment trouble there, right? So firstly, let me begin by thanking the Indic Research Forum, a think tank of great repute, for their invitation to me to chair this session. And we have about 2.5 hours and 5 very eminent speakers with wide and varied experience in dealing with the insurgencies and challenges in the Northeast region. So what I'm going to do is I'll be requesting them for their initial remarks for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then for about half an hour or so, we'll have a question answer session. Let me set the stage by spelling out a few issues as far as the Northeast is concerned. And the first one, of course, has to be the extraordinary geostrategic importance of this particular region. Now, we all know that it shares almost 5,000 kilometers long borders with 5 countries, and all of them are not friendly to us, starting from Nepal, Bhutan, China, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. So because of its location and historical linkages with the neighboring countries, this region is crucial for our relations, firstly with Bangladesh, which is a very, very important, strategically important country for us, and Myanmar, and also for actualization of our Act East policy, because a lot of our connectivity will run through these countries towards the east. The region is connected with the rest of the country by a very narrow corridor, which is called Siliguri corridor. And at its narrowest point, it is just about 21 kilometers. So I will not be wrong in saying that the Northeast region is crucial for the national security architecture. And this particular realization came to us after the 1962 war, when Chinese troops had reached almost the foothills of Assam. So that's the kind of security or strategic importance this has. Now, the second issue which I wish to flag here is the the feeling of isolation which the people of Northeast have. And we keep hearing in the press the way they react to the comments that people make in North. Now, whole of Northeast was part of the Bengal province during the British period, and they governed it as though it was a adjacent subordinate area of Bengal province. So that is why they introduced the concept of inner line permit and other provisions, basically leaving the tribes to live the way they wanted to. And the idea was that British administration did not want to spend money on administering these areas, which were very difficult. So they had to bring in connectivity and things like that. So what they thought was leave them to their own fate. So the insurgencies have their roots in their sense of isolation, historical tribal disputes, and lack of development and connectivity with rest of the country. As we carved out states, some of the tribes were split by borders. And Nagas is an example. General Shokin Chauhan would be speaking about the problem of Naga insurgency. And I'm sure he'll bring out the way the Naga people are split into a few states. Now, because of this geographical location, the neighbors could easily provide support in terms of arms, training, and safe sanctuaries to the insurgent groups in the past in order to foment trouble in our country. Now, China and erstwhile East Pakistan were the main ones. So they got these guys, trained them, provided them finance, provided them with arms, and also guided them in conduct of their operation. However, with passage of time and the actions which the government of India, through the armed forces and other instruments of power, took, the nature and complexion of the insurgencies has changed. The ideological moorings have been shed. The groups are now open to negotiations and securing autonomy within the Indian states. The Naga insurgency, the oldest of them all, still remains, and Jen Shokin Chauhan would cover that in far more greater detail as to what are the latest developments which are taking place. Now, connected with this is that the support bases have been shifting to the urban areas where most of the material and finances are located. And in most states, it is more of a law and order problem than that of an insurgency. However, I wish to caution that these kind of problems can still be exploited by China, which is a master in the gray zone conflicts to foment trouble for us. And we'll have to be watching against that. However, in spite of this insurgency now turning into more of a law and order problem, there are huge challenges which this particular region faces. And the first that comes to my mind is the illegal migration, be it from the Bangladesh or Rohingyas, and we know the kind of political problems it is creating for our country. The second one is drugs and illegal weapons trafficking. Is now why I'm highlighting this is because drugs actually fund the insurgencies and the terrorism. So therefore, drugs and illegal weapons are still continuing, and they are continuing from our neighboring countries, be it Myanmar or some other countries, right? Now, these impact the society at large, the law and order situation, and also can potentially become a huge national security problem. The next one I wish to highlight is that armed forces have been deployed to deal with the insurgencies in the Northeast. They employed the concept of use of minimum force, and Indian Army has achieved excellent results and helped the government of India in normalizing the situation and bringing the groups to the negotiating table. We'll be evaluating India's counter-insurgency capabilities in Northeast by one of the speakers. And the next point is the government of India took many path-breaking administrative and bureaucratic reforms and reconciliation measures with the people of Northeast. The first one, the first policy, and we should all be very proud of that, is the dialogue and negotiations has been the cornerstone of Government of India's policy. Mizoram is a huge success in that. Lal Denga, who was one of the insurgents, led the Mizo National Front. Government of India opened talks with him in 1971. They fructified and resulted in the Mizo Accord of 1987. And Lal Denga accepted Indian constitution and he became the chief minister of the state. So that's one of the really important development. Right. Then there were some other structural changes which the government of India took by way of granting greater political autonomy and statehood. We know that many of these 7, 8 states were carved out sequentially, I mean, subsequently after the independence of India. The other notable thing that government of India did was the Article 371 Alpha, which protects the religious and the social practices of Naga people. This is something very innovative instrument used by government of India to bring normalcy in that part of the country. Surrender come rehabilitation of insurgents, providing them with monetary support is something which has yielded a lot of results. Then the government of India provides a lot of financial assistance to these states to the tune of almost 80%, because the economy of these states is very poor. So the government of India is providing assistance so that the development takes place and they are brought into the mainstream of our country, and the whole region and the country develops. So now, before I hand over to the first speaker, let me introduce them. The first one is, of course, Mr. Harjeet Sandhu. He is a retired IPS officer, having held leadership positions in the field of law enforcement, counterterrorism, war crimes, homicide investigations, and so many others. He was with the CBI and was also DIG in Manipur State at international level. He was with the Interpol and the UN Security Council. He will be speaking to us on Golden Triangle, drug nexus, and the insurgencies. The next one is Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan. He was the chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group in August 2018. He was the Director General of Assam Rifles, India's oldest and the largest paramilitary forces. He has held many prestigious appointments in his long career in the army. He has vast experience in the military diplomacy, as he was the military attaché in Nepal. Now, next speaker is Brigadier Rahul Bhosle. He is an Indian Army veteran with 30 years of active field experience in counter militancy and terrorism operations. Presently, he is director of Asia Security Risk.com, a South Asian security risk and knowledge management consultancy which specializes in future scenarios, military capacity building, and conflict trends in South Asia. And it's a very popular site. I subscribe to it with great interest. I read whatever he writes. He'll be speaking on evaluating India's counter-insurgency capabilities in Northeast. Then we have Miss Rami Desai. She is an alumnus of King's College, London. She has degree in anthropology of religion and theology. She has been actively involved in research, fieldwork, and analysis of conflict areas with special focus on Northeast region of India for over a decade, focusing on religious conflict, insurgency, demographic changes, as well as border issues. So she is eminently qualified to be speaking to us on the case of illegal Bangladeshi and Rohingya immigration and its impact on our country. Then we have Mr. Gurdial Singh Pandher, IPS, and he is a veteran of Indian Army who participated in Indo-Pak War 1965 in the Cham sector. On joining the IPS, he was allotted Manipur Tripura cadre, and he served with distinction in Manipur for over 20 years in many capacities, and of course reaching the highest post of DGP. Then in Manipur, he served as the managing director of Manipur Development Society for rehabilitation and employment generation. And as DG of prisons, he reformed many insurgents and brought them in the society. He was awarded Police Medal for meritorious service and President's Police Medal for distinguished service. He was also the DG NSG, and he'll be speaking to us on the administrative and bureaucratic reforms and reconciliation with people of Northeast. So I extend a very hearty welcome to all the eminent speakers, and let me request Mr. Sandhu for his initial remarks, please.
Thank you, General Rakesh Padoria. I also wish to thank Vice Admiral Dilip Deshpande, because both of you have, in fact, already introduced the subject, and some of that I was going to speak. You already, both of you spoke. Excellent. And I also wish to put on the record that my seeing Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan after 32 years, because we both worked in that region in Ukhrul when I was SP of Ukhrul, and General Chauhan that time was Major Shokin Chauhan. So we have operated on the ground at that time. So, and I also wish to put on the record, particularly in few seconds, the contribution in my career of Mr. G.S. Pandey. When I joined Manipur as a young probationer, he was DIG. He had just come back from Punjab that time. So I learned a lot of things from him and saw his two sides. The way he will talk of those, of course, how he tried to integrate some of those hardened insurgents, even in prison. I visited him in prison when he was DG prisons, and one of his prisoners gave me my nameplate, and I still have that nameplate it has gone with me all over the world wherever I have moved. So it is still there with me. So thank you very much. So let me see, I did spend a lot of time in Northeast as SP and later on as DIG on operations, and had good cooperation with the Assam Rifles and other agencies. And I was so excited when I met the General Chauhan after so many years. We both have grown old, but with that, experienced also. So let me try to see if I can use my presentation, because I'm not very familiar with this Google Meet, but Zoom we do. Let me see, I have put some slides and that will make it more clear. Let me see if I can. Your entire screen allow. Let me see if it works. Otherwise, I will.
Sandhu sir, you may kindly open that file first, then minimize that, and when you go to the full screen, you open from your ribbon. It will come, sir.
No, it is open.
Harjit, it has come. Thank you. Now you just put the presentation on.
Yeah, it is on. Can you see?
Yeah, I can see. I can see.
Okay, then I don't see the screen, but doesn't matter. So you see the slides, right?
Yeah, I can see the slides.
Okay, thank you. Then I continue with that. So the topic today is for me is renewed security concerns, the Golden Triangle, drug nexus, and insurgency. So if we see here, India is stuck between the two sides. The strategic location is that we have Golden Crescent on one side, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, and we have the Golden Triangle on the other side. So Golden Triangle has Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. So we will be speaking only about the Golden Triangle today. Now, if you look at this, the Golden Triangle and Golden Crescent, together they form one of the biggest areas where this opium production and which leads to heroin. I have worked with Interpol also during that time, was dealing with both the things. I traveled physically in the this triangle area, Golden Triangle, right on the border from Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, when Khunsa used to be the head of that, all the operations. So today we will concentrate only on this Golden Triangle. So this is how the Golden Triangle looks like. The area is porous, highly porous, is remote and second largest producer in the world, because the first largest is the Golden Crescent, is one of the oldest and most notorious routes for narcotics supply to Europe and other parts of the world, is also a gateway to other drugs such as amphetamines, methamphetamine, and yaba. Yaba is known as crazy medicine in Thai. So it is a combination of actually methamphetamine with caffeine. And the local people use a lot, and it is also smuggled. Then all the cough syrups which contain codeine. When I was SP Ukhrul from 90 to 92, we seized something like few lakhs of, like almost 1 million bottles of that banned cough syrup, because which was going from India to Burma. So that was the opposite side. So opium in Burma has been there all the way right from 1948, when the opium and insurgency started together. So this book is a very good account of how the opium and insurgency in Burma, they commingled with each other, and then it came to India. So if you can see this slide, the India-Myanmar border, our chair mentioned about that, the border with various states which have with, but I'm just concentrating here on India-Myanmar border. It is about 1,643 kilometers, and most of that is hilly. The states sharing border with Myanmar are Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal. Currently, India is building a corridor there so that we can at least put a barrier to drug smuggling and arms trafficking, etc. So that when it comes up, we'll see. And these two, the movement between India and Myanmar, I have myself gone there without having any passport entry anywhere during those days, crossed over from the official channels as well from informal ones. Because India-Myanmar border, it has a free movement regime in place because it is a friendly country, where the tribes residing in the villages near the border can cross freely and travel 16 kilometers across either side. Actually, this provision was for the local tribes because they have their relatives this side of the border and that side of the border also. But this also facilitates drug trafficking. I went in 1986 myself as a smuggler, posing as smuggler from Bombay, and with the help of some friendly BSF operatives there, not knowing that I was an IPS officer. I was very new in the state, so they thought that I was a smuggler and somebody had facilitated. I crossed over that bridge where you see on the left this ladies crossing. That is the bridge between Indian More and Tamu, the Burma side. I moved there, stayed for 8 nights and days with those smugglers, kept on moving here and there. Finally, we ended up arresting 9 of them with the drugs. That was way back in February 1986. So this free movement regime, it affects about 250 villages all over, and around 300,000 people who can cross visa-free through 150 small and large formal and informal border crossings. But officially for the tourists, government has opened 2 border crossings. One is More, that is which I mentioned, More to Tamu in Myanmar, and the second one is in Mizoram, Zokhab-Thar, Rev-Khavadar. But there are so many informal crossings which the people keep on going there, especially the arms trafficker. Right in the Ukhrul, up there on the northern side, which borders the Somra tract on the Burmese side, there even district officials don't come there. Somebody mentioned that law enforcement, law and order problem is the real one. I went there in 91 to that border town in Ukhrul, and people told me that they have never seen a district officer all their lives. So it was the first SP in that district who reached there, and I made it a point to visit almost everyone. Sorry, going to that, I don't want to make it very long. So going to the nexus of Northeast insurgents and drug traffickers who are spreading this, the best example is the arrest on 25 October 2021 of R.K. Hopkinson. He is from Senapati and belongs to NSCN Isak Muiva group. So Lieutenant General Chauhan and Mr. Pandey, they both are very familiar with that name and with that region, because this man has been continuing to take, he's a deputy minister there in the NSCN self-styled government, and when he was arrested after getting injured, he admitted doing this since 2012, and he's also allegedly on the NIA's wanted list in connection with brutal killing of NPP's Tirong Abo in Arunachal and his family and his son. So the challenges of operating in the Northeast, the chair mentioned about these challenges, but I quickly will do. Assam Rifle is doing a great job there, but still there are so many challenges. The border provides a channel for movement of insurgents, narcotic trafficking, gun running, smuggling of wildlife, timber, precious stones also. A lot of Burmese teak comes from that side, and when I was SP Ukhrul, we arrested a lot of people and seized in one single day 17 trucks belonging to the then chief minister who was in power, but of course we succeeded in doing that. Then strong ethnic unity and strong sense of regionalism and tribal loyalties. This helps them. There are a lot of sympathizers. They will pass on the information about securities movements. And then obviously when we go there, even once my own senior officer provided me intelligence that drugs will be coming, but he gave me deliberately wrong information provided on the other side, that they are going to the other side, and we put their team. So later on, I learned my lesson that such information, when comes from a local person, you have to take it with bit of caution. The terrain itself poses a huge challenge. We have seen it a lot of time. We go for operation. Those people know the area very well, but we do not know that well. Then the free movement regime, which I already mentioned, and with that, the corruption in local police, corruption in various agencies. Because one example I gave about the BSF officer who helped us to go as smugglers in 1986, of course, subsequently, the whole, not only company, the whole battalion was moved out of Manipur. But that shows that corruption is there. And even yesterday's session, Mr. Pandey said corruption in Punjab was a lot, but even in Manipur, it is no less, or even in the whole of the Northeast. These corrupt officials, they do not act against criminals despite having intelligence inputs. So then poor state of education, unemployment, poverty, increasing spread of HIV, AIDS, ethnic conflicts are some of the other issues. Children are being forced to become drug carriers in promise of better livelihood. Such fragile situation along the India-Myanmar border jeopardizes the region into becoming a hub of drug trafficking, thus challenging our national internal security. Now, major challenges we already covered. So this I will not repeat all of that. Subsequently, we can discuss, because this easy availability, the drugs not only stay there, they come to the other region, and then it moves to the Naxal affected area. So once it comes out of the Northeast, then it goes all over. Then the pollution that it causes. So let's go to the way forward, and then we wait for the questions later on. The way forward is familiarization of the terrain. Because a lot of people we see, they simply jeep through. This was the term used by Mr. K.F. Rustamji, that many of the officials in the district, they just jeep through their tenure. In the north, especially in the Northeast, it will be like some of them have never gone out of their either office, home, and their jeep. So they have to get down on the ground, they have to move, they have to meet people, they have to understand. And it's not boasting, but when I was in Tamenglong, 238 villages that district has, and I visited all the 238 villages within my 3-year term. And reaching some of the villages takes you more than 12 to 15 hours, some by jeep and some on foot. Then actionable intelligence is what is required, because intelligence, unlike French wine, does not get better with age. Whenever you are there, in whatever capacity, we do get intelligence, even from RAW, even from IB, from various agencies, but the intelligence always comes that, oh, they crossed this one, or they were in this village on this date. That intelligence is of no use. We need operational intelligence, because I was successful, my team was successful in seizing a lot of drugs during Ukhrul days. Once we seized one oil tanker. The oil tanker was full of cannabis, processed cannabis. Now, if you do not have intelligence, how will you stop an oil tanker and tell him to open the lid below that? We stopped it. He said it is oil. So I told him, open the lid from the bottom. If it is oil, he said it will all leak. I said, no problem. It's my responsibility. You open it. And then we found that it was 2,500 kilograms of highly processed, high quality cannabis, which was coming to Bihar. So then better policing of the interstate borders. All these checkposts which are leading to other states, they are highly lucrative or wet postings in the police nomenclature, because they get money. They get money from every vehicle crossing through that. So everybody is even getting recommendations to post them. So obviously, when the police is letting you go, like as I was let go by the then BSF company there, so that interstate borders, not only international, interstate borders also have to be policed particularly well in that area, because drugs are coming from that side. Then alternate employment generation, that I think Mr. Pandey will cover. So that definitely takes this youth who are easy victims to taking them away from them. Then keeping the youth busy and luring them away from drugs. These youth have to be put in some constructive activity. During my Ukhrul days of 3 years, we planted there almost like 100,000 trees all over the district using the youth. TKS, there used to be very active student union, which was on the borderline between underground and overground people. So we used them and kept them busy, organized football tournament, organized badminton tournament. I myself participated. So and it was that time published even in police news that this is very good step to lure these youth away from terrorism and the drugs, and then having a drug de-addiction and rehabilitation in that area, because then at least these people can become better human beings. So thank you very much for that. I tried to rush through that because it was an initial one. I didn't want to make it very long. So I'm available for any questions. I don't think there will be anything for me to speak, especially when we have better qualified people, Mr. Pandey and General Shokin Chauhan speaking there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandhu. And may I now request General Shokin Chauhan to speak on tackling the Naga insurgency and analyzing the recent developments there.
Thank you, General Rakesh. It's wonderful to see Mr. Sandhu. My mind is taken back to 1990. He was a very dynamic SP when I was a young company commander in one of the villages of Ukhrul, fighting a difficult, unending insurgency. And I only, and Mr. Sandhu also, realize how difficult it is. General Bhaduria has been a close friend. We've been course-mates from the National Defense Academy. Same squadron, so makes us even closer. And we've literally done every possible course together. So I value your comments, Rakesh. Thank you, Harjeet, for your kind words. And let me just sort of put this Naga perspective, Naga insurgency in perspective. My own background with the Nagas is actually unique. After being a young company commander in Lower Laishin and then Tolai and Kachai, I have returned there almost 3 times subsequently, uh, as an instructor in the CIW school for a while, then as a 2IC in Bomdila, Sela Pass, and subsequently as a G1 Ops of Headquarter 3 Corps. And finally, towards the end of my career, I was the Director General of the Assam Rifles, chartered to oversee the complete insurgency. And immediately after retirement, the government asked me to come back and try and resolve the issues of the Naga insurgency. And I was the chairman of the ceasefire group located in Kohima, Nagaland. So I've had an amazing opportunity to meet the insurgents, to talk to them about their issues, to try and gain their trust, and to try and deal with them as human beings rather than as terrorists that we should be chasing and killing. Much of what I talk about is personal experience. All I can say is that they are wonderful people. If you know them personally, horrible, very difficult opponents to deal with. Mr. Sandhu would know. Very aggressive, uh, very good on the ground in their own areas, extremely brutal and dedicated to their cause. But when you get to know them personally, things are quite different, to tell you the truth. Uh, so let me just start with what this insurgency is all about, so that we can go to a point at which we call the Naga insurgency the mother of all insurgencies. Why is it the mother? Because it was the insurgency that started somewhere in just post-independence, when the people of Nagaland or the Naga tribes decided that they would not and did not want to be a part of the newly minted Republic of India. And from August 14th, when they raised their flag, it was a Naga shawl in Kohima, and I have gone to that point. They have continuously said that we do not want to be a part of India. Rakesh Baduria has already told us about the Northeast, it's the easternmost region, and about the Siliguri corridor, which is extremely sensitive and extremely strategic for India. But what we must know about the Northeast is that the Northeast is, as a whole, is not a single entity with a common political destiny. Somewhere in the mainland, we start comparing it and talking about the Northeast having, as if the Northeast has a single problem. It doesn't. It comprises of 8 different states. The tribal communities of Northeast India are living in the fringe of 3 great political communities: India, China, and Burma. And historically, these communities have played the roles of buffer communities, and the others the role of bridge communities between these 3 great political communities. The region is, as Harjit Sandhu said, is of great geopolitical importance to the Indian subcontinent due to its terrain, its location, and peculiar demographic dynamics. And it is one of actually the most difficult regions to govern. But its 40 million population accounts for only 3.1 million, 3.1% of India's population. 40 million is only 3.1% of India's population. Post-independence, the history of this region has been marred by bloodshed, by tribal feuds and underdevelopment. And it has only been the protracted deployment and operations of the army and the Assam Rifles that have been actually instrumental in reducing the levels of violence and restoring the security situation to ensure that civil governance elements can function. But it's a difficult world, and I know how difficult it must have been for both Mr. Pandey as well as Harjit Sandhu to deal with the people there. What is the origin of the Naga insurgency? We must understand the past. So when the Naga club was carried out, decided that they would not be a part, they consisted of just people from the Angami tribe in the villages around Kohima. And they said, if the British government wants to throw us away, we pray that we are not thrust into the mercy of the people who have never conquered us themselves, and to whom we were never subjected, but leave us alone to determine for themselves and in ancient times. So the origin of this Naga descent, or the beginning of the thought of an insurgency, is actually traceable to colonial patronage and probably manifested itself in the British backing of a rudimentary club as far back as 1918. That means it's been more than 100 years. It was called Naga Club, and it consisted informally of some Naga government officials who submitted a memorandum to the Simon Commission on 10th January 1929. As I told you, all 20 signatories were mainly from Kohima, mostly from the Angami tribe. No representative of any other Naga tribe met the Simon Commission. But the issues that they raised then and the issues that continue to be a problem, and I'm sure Harjit Sandhu and Mr. Pandher would agree, are the socio-economic issues. Pertain to poor education, a small population, a fear of an impending alien rule. They feared that the minority presence in the council of the Assam province, as General Bhadoria said, they were ruled from Bengal and Guwahati, from Assam, from the Assam province. They have remained politically inconsequential. Even today, Nagaland has only one Lok Sabha seat, only one Rajya Sabha seat. So their voice is actually simply not heard. This Naga club further induced the birth of several tribal-based Naga councils. Lothas are one more tribe there. So the Lotha Council was raised in 1923. The Aos from Makokchung raised this issue in 1928. And by the 1940s, the British officials persuaded the Nagas to change the name of the Naga club to the Naga Hill District Tribal Council, the NHDTC, in 1945. I must tell you what a famous journalist, Mr. B.G. Varghese, spoke, because B.G. Varghese has written a lot about Nagaland and about the Naga tribes. He said that the Naga insurgent groups hold that there's an independence movement and not a secessionist movement. The argument is that they lost their freedom to the British, as did India, and the colonial power ruled both from Delhi as a matter of convenience, even as they fragmented the Naga people by placing them under different administrative jurisdictions within India and Burma. Hence, when the British departed in 1947, both India and the Naga people became independent. By 1946, the council acquired a new name. It became the Naga National Council. And it advocated a simple approach to protest and subsequently matured as a political organization, representing the genuine grievances of the Naga tribes. The NNC submitted a 4-point memorandum to the government on 19th June 1946 and requested for local autonomy and a separate electorate, which was quite easily done. In 1947, June, that's just before independence, we had the governor of Assam called Mr. Hydari. He signed the Naga agreement on the 26th to 28th of June. It was a 9-point agreement with the government of India, represented by Akbar Hydari. Clause 9 of this agreement, why I'm telling you this is essential to see where they stand. And when you sit down and talk with them, this is what they tell you, that we've been fooled from the beginning. Clause 9 of the agreement said renewal or renegotiating of the agreement after 10 years. That means if the Nagas did not agree to stay with India for 10 years post 1947, there would be a renegotiating and a different agreement. Unfortunately, this agreement was not accepted by the new government of India, which had taken over the country, and that's when the descent started and the subsequent start of insurgency. The start of this insurgency starts with a person called Fizo, who is an Angami. He calls for independence, and the small NNC independence group with Fizo declared independence on 14th August 1947. If you go to Kohima, you must visit the small village called Konoma. It's about 14 to 15 kilometers ahead of Kohima. It takes about 40 odd minutes on a very bad road and consists mainly of the southern and eastern Angami groups. But Konoma has a long history. They have fought the British in the middle 18th century or 19th century, and they continue to fight as people. Most of these people who joined FISO were relations of FISO. So when FISO declared independence, there was no furious outbreak of movement or insurgent activity. The NNC only insisted on the implementation of the 9-point agreement between Akbar Haidari and the NNC, signed in June 1947. By 1955, an insurgency involving weapons and violence had started. At this time, a small section of supporters took FISO to Zeliang and then to Dhaka on 6 December 1956, and subsequently he reached London. In 1956, we signed an agreement, 16-point agreement. In 1961, we signed a 16-point agreement, and subsequently we raised the state of Nagaland. General Bhaduria covered what he said was the 371 alpha, which actually is an extremely sensible clause to have put in. We had 370 for Kashmir, so there was 371 for Nagaland. 371 alpha was for Nagaland, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot were for the other northeastern states. Why it's important is that what I want to tell you is that the Indian Constitution has the capability of being flexible and has the capability of telling these minority groups, especially small minority groups like the Nagas, that look, we are here to protect your interests. Now, how does this affect us? Because when we are stuck, and as we are stuck today, with talks with the NSC and IM, and both Harjeet Sandhu and Mr. Pandher will tell you that within the Northeast, if there is the mother organization of all insurgents, it is the NSC and Isaac Muiva. It is this group which controls everything, which is the mother to all the other groups. You can talk of ULFA, you can talk of the Bodo movement, you can talk of everybody else. They have taken their strength, their training, their weapons, and their assistance from the NSC and IM. And like I said, I've had the unique privilege of actually visiting the camp, the NSC and IM camp in Hebron. I wish I could share the photographs with you. I met the present CNC. He's now a 4-star general. He calls himself a 4-star general. Anthony Shimre. I have met Mr. Muiva. I met the new chairman, Kyutuku, whom I missed killing in 1989, and I told him so. So when you sit down and you discuss with them, you find them extremely erudite about their situations. You find them talking of wanting peace. Now, I'm sure Harjeet Sandhu would remember the name of Atem. I had dinner with Atem. He called me over for dinner and he said, sir, I don't know if you'll come home. I said, no, I will come home. So I drove from Kohima down to Dimapur and I sat down and had dinner with Atem. And Atem served dinner with his own hands after he cooked it. And he explained to me and his wife, they explained to me and my wife, how they had lived in the jungle and how all 4 of their children have been born in the jungle. And how now they don't want to go back to the jungle. How they are looking for a peace. A peace with which their struggle of the last 40 years has some meaning. I sat down with Muiva and after few days of a few hours of talking with Muiva, he told me, he says, General, I want peace. I'm 84 years old. I have no children and I'm an ill man. But I want to have peace that has some meaning. And this meaning is what we all today have to work at, to try and get the NSC and IM and the government of India to come to an agreement by which we will be able to bring peace to the Northeast. If we can get the NSC and IM into this peace agreement, we would have been able to solve almost 50 to 60% of the insurgencies of the Northeast. They are the mother. In fact, over a drink, Anthony tells me that even during the Khalistan movement, the NSC and IM had sent somebody to Bhindanwale. So that is how interconnected the insurgencies of our country are. General Bhadoria spoke of the fact that it is a business, that today it's a law and order problem. Of course, it's a law and order problem. But the underlying fact is that there are these huge insurgent groups. Let me just give you an idea. I sat with I had dinner with a chap called Khitovi, who is the chairman of the general secretary of the NSCN Khitovi Nikpao group, KN, which after the NSC and IM is the next largest group. And they may be having between 500 to 800 cadre. So as we were having dinner, Khitovi tells me, he says, General, the problem with today's youth is they want to wear jockey underwear. They want branded names. They want branded dresses. They don't want to stay in the jungle where we don't have broadband communication because they can't talk on WhatsApp. So the issue is we have a chance now. These people are looking at a different perspective of India. 90% of the Naga youth in Nagaland are connected to India. I have sat down and talked to every armed cadre. Why? Because as the chairman of the ceasefire monitoring group, I used to issue identity cards to the armed cadre, selected armed cadre of the 4 or 5 and now 6 NSCN groups. And when I would give them the identity card, I insisted on meeting them personally and making them sit with me and then asking him why he was in this movement. 99% of them do not carry ideological baggage. They want a living, a sensible living. In the case of the NSC and IM, and Harjit Sandhu will agree with me, they have trained these children, taken these children, educated them in Bangalore, Delhi, Pune, Bombay, all over the place. And they have brought back these educated cadre to form what they call are the middle group, the civil group of the NSC and IM, which is also a very strong group. I asked one of them, and I won't mention his name because he's still in the system. And he became very close to me because he would tell me everything. And I said, when did you come? He was in MSc. And he said, sir, I was doing my MSc. But when I returned to my village told me that you have been selected by us to join the NSC and IM. What does this tell you? That he's not joined because of an ideology. He's joined because his village, his home, his parents told him, join the NSC and IM. He's at almost the top level of this insurgency headquarters. But they are willing to give it up. They're willing to come in. I will not talk of tactical operations. I will not talk of anything else because everyone knows Brigadier Bhosle is also there. And I'm certain everyone knows about the tactical operations. I am today an ardent believer that Nagaland needs this peace, the Northeast needs this peace. I am a believer that we can get them. And why I mentioned 371 Alpha, 371, bravo, Charlie, is that our constitution is flexible enough to give them what we feel we can and to give them an assurance that we will protect their culture and their way of living, which is why they started this insurgency in the first place. I had my bodyguards who were Naga police bodyguards, Naga armed police bodyguards. They talked of Modi and why Modi was good for as a prime minister. If they are so linked in with the Indian political system, then this is the right time to get them in. And whatever I'm telling you now, fellow panelists and whoever's listening, is that I have told the same thing to the NSA, that we are in a unique time. We can end this insurgency by showing flexibility. But what we need here is we need people whom they can trust. We need interlocutors and we need people who are represented to the government who can be trusted by the insurgent groups. Because the greatest problem of why talks fail is not because of the insurgents. It is because of the lack of trust between them and the interlocutors and the government. This happened with Mr. Ravi when the NSC and IM decided that they would not talk to Ravi anymore last year, because exactly what Rakesh was saying was that Mr. Ravi said this is a law and order problem. If we reduce the insurgency to a law and order problem, they become confined to the state. They talk of themselves as a separate government. A government which is permitted to raise taxes. A government which is permitted to recruit. And which is the reason why we've neither been able to stop this recruitment, nor stop what we call extortion, but they call taxation. Surely, amongst our group, we can come up with a sensible solution, an innovative solution to get the NSC and IM and the rest of these NSC and groups back into our fold. I must tell you that when I was negotiating with the Khango Koniak was a general with the NSC and Koniak group, the NSC and Khaplang group. And they were the ones who broke the ceasefire and went to Myanmar after killing 18 of our soldiers of 6 Dogra in Manipur. So I got Khango over and I was sitting and talking with him. And I said, Khango, what are you looking for? Why you're today 78 years old? Why are you still fighting with us? And Khango, as you know, broke the NSC and K and left the NSCN Myanmar-based faction to bring back almost 100 cadres of the NSCN K Indian cadres back into India. So Khango said, sir, I am aware and realistic that I cannot fight the government of India. But what I do want is for my Koniak brothers, I do want unification. So some of us talk very glibly about having a fence between the 1643-kilometer long Indo-Myanmar border. You can't do that because you will divide communities which have never been divided. The 16-kilometer free move regime is an innovative solution. And similar innovative solutions can be given to bring peace from this insurgency. Today, there is no situation that we can live with an insurgency anymore. You have to get peace. If you are going to utilize the Northeast, and it is your strategic area, you have to get peace. Another issue that I would like to tell you is that till today, there is no evidence that the NSC and IM over the last 2 years has contacted China. They have been careful about contacting China, and China has been trying their best to connect with them. They have not contacted China. They are aware that contacting China is a red flag for the government of India. But the more time we take, the more restive these insurgent armed cadre will become. It is my experience, and I have seen this in Nepal when I was the DA, that each party, when it breaks, Each group, when it breaks into more virulent forms of the movement. I wonder if you agree with me, Harjit, on this issue. Every insurgency group today in the NSC and IM, we have Muiva, who's 85 years old. We have Atem, who's about 70 plus years old. You have Anthony, who's 60 years old. You have a group of leaders who are old, who have fought this insurgency and who've lived in the jungles and now want to come back over ground. If you do not get an agreement and if Muiva dies, the NSC and IM will break up into two to three more virulent forms. Harjit talked about the person they caught, Jackson. There are more virulent people sitting in Myanmar who will only increase the problems of India. And Muiva is not in good health. If we have to get an agreement, this is the best time to get them. And I talk to you from great experience, from after having spoken to them, that we don't have an option. This is the right time. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I hope whatever I spoke was useful to you all. I purposely left out these situations because that's known to everybody. What I wanted to cover was my own experience with these insurgents and my own talks with them, because I talked with everybody. And I must tell you this latent issue about the killing of or the death of 16 Koniaks in Mon district recently on the 4th of December. That has hit them very, very hard. Khango almost returned to the insurgency because these are his Konyak brothers. This happened, this movement of the special forces in Nagaland is an old story. And when I was the chairman, I stopped the special forces from operating there. And calling up late General Bipin Rawat and telling him, I said, here is no place for special forces. It is because of this excessive use of violence that we will lose this place once again. And violence will continue to beget violence if we don't bring in peace now. Thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, General Chauhan, for those comments. I know few people have raised their hands, but what I will do is I'll let the other speakers speak so that we get the full context. And then, Mr. Sandhu, then you can come in, because we are running slightly short of time because of the management of the time. We'll just go like this, and then towards the end, then we would have a discussion. Thank you. Right. May I now request Brigadier Rahul Bhosle to please speak. And sir, I would also request you to touch on this aspect of ASFA, which our audience would would want to have some clarity, because there are two views. Should it be there? Should it not be there? All right. So I'm sure you would be touching on this and giving the point of view of the armed forces, and also analyzing this, whether it should be there or not. So over to Brigadier Bhosle, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Am I audible?
Sir, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, General Baduria, for the very kind remarks, and thank you for our panelists, all of them, and some wonderful comments which have been made, and wonderful description of the situation which has been made by the previous panelists. I'm really grateful to them, because they have now set the stage for what I am going to speak, and they have given me confidence to speak what I am going to speak. The first thing I want to bring out is that there's no half front in Northeast, and that may be disappointing to the various people who are looking at the half front. At present, there is no half front in the Northeast, and we should just get away with this idea that the Northeast people, the Northeast, are something alien to India. They are very much part of India, which has been already brought out by General Chauhan so very eminently. Why I'm trying to say this, the situation is they've gone changed from what it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even what it was 10 years back. Today, there is no insurgency in the Northeast. Let's be very clear. And let's be very clear that the other issues which come up, people running, Drugs, this is not war. For God's sake, this is absolutely not war. And I see somebody is trying to say that evangelical activities of the religious communities, that is not war for God's sake. That is a socio-economic issue, right? So let's not mix up between half-front war, what are socio-economic issues, what are law and order challenges. As of today, Northeast is not a half-front war, and that's what I like to categorically state, and that's what I also like to emphasize. As I go by, I'll explain to it. Now, what is war? Today, war is being used for every the sort of it's an adjective used everywhere. Use war, media war, cyber war. It's not war. War is, as far as war is concerned, is a state of armed conflict. It's a state of intense armed conflict. Includes violence, includes bloodshed. Today, if you see the figures, and as I'll quote from the South Asia Terrorism Portal, which is a very, very reliable source of data state. What is the level of the fatalities or insurgency in any of the states in the Northeast? It's very low, less than 25, 30 for the last many years. So, I mean, let's get away with this issue that Northeast is a half-front war. No, it is not. Yes, there is drug running going on. I'm not trying to say drugs are not coming. So, aren't drugs coming from Maharashtra, to Maharashtra, the coast? Are drugs not coming through Karnataka? So, let's not blame the Northeast, but this is one of the aspects. We were operating the so-called mainland of India. We have to very much be very clear that if you treat the Northeast as a half-front war, you're losing the battle itself. They would not like to be treated as alien, and they are very much part of us, as General Chauhan also emphasized, and others. So the situation is completely different. Let's not get carried away with what is the situation today and what was the situation a few years back. Today, for instance, let's see if there is a war with China in Arunachal Pradesh. Of course, I am not expecting a war with China in any case, because neither China nor India has the capability to reach the political objectives which requires war. Then skirmishes will carry on. Anyway, let's take a situation, a hypothetical scenario of war with China. I can assure you, Northeast people today are not going to operate against the Indian forces. They are going to support us. The fear which we had earlier, that the line of communications or the line of supplies will be disrupted, is not going to happen. That situation is not being obtained in the Northeast, and that's where I think we must be very clear and get away with this idea of half-front in the North, as far as half-front war in the Northeast. And war in any case is out. There's no question of having a war in the present scenario, even between India, Pakistan, and China. Yes, we will have competition, we will have confrontation. The war is something which is completely out of the way, because war requires political objectives. What political objective can be achieved? India or China or Pakistan can achieve in the present scenario. There's no very limited political. So war is out, but that's not the basic issue. What I'm trying to say is that we must give Northeast people the due. Yes, there is criminal terrorism. What General Bhaduria said is law and order. I would go 1 point ahead. This is criminal terrorism. Extortion is ongoing. That is, criminal terrorism cannot be equated with war. And that is why, because the more you talk of war, and the more people will shun away from the Northeast. As you know, the government of India is trying its best to get people from abroad, Japan, the European countries, to invest in Northeast. Now, if you keep talking of half-front war, they are not going to come there. And the Northeast requires a lot of investment. So that's another point I would like to emphasize, that why Northeast is not a war. If you look at the state of insurgency, insurgency has various stages, as you know. One is the preparatory stage. Then is a strategic offensive, strategic defensive, strategic offensive. After that is success or defeat. And thereafter is a frozen conflict. Now, as far as the Northeast is concerned, today it's a frozen conflict or a criminal terrorism in all states across the globe. Does it imply that there will be no threat emerging in the days ahead? I will envisage certain actions which we should take as a later point, which will ensure that the situation does not deteriorate. And that is the action which we'll have to focus on, which I'll cover separately. But let me cover the state of insurgency, or the state of militancy, or the state of dissent in Northeast. There are various types. One is the ethnic separatism. Now, Naga issue is an ethnic separatist issue. The minimum demands of the Naga is autonomy. And the government of India is not willing to give them autonomy. They want autonomy, they want their own constitution and own flag. Now I find no solution coming to this in the near future. Because if from Kashmir has been, you have removed the constitution or removed the flag from Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir in 2019, 2 years back, you suddenly cannot compromise that there will be a flag or the autonomy. Now, if you don't give them autonomy, then this slow burning insurgency is going to continue. So we have to accept that the slow burning insurgency continue as far as Naga is concerned, and this ethnic separatism is something which is very, very important and will carry on. The same is the issue with Manipur. In Manipur also they want autonomy. The Manipuri or the Meitei insurgents, when I'm talking Manipuri, the Meitei insurgents. Meitei insurgents very clearly say that the accession to India is unfair, it is politically incorrect, and we are not going to accept it. So here again, I don't find that there will be much compromise. The slow burning insurgency in Manipur, the Meitei portion is going to continue. The other aspect of the insurgency is the ethnic identity assertion. Most of the insurgencies or most of the dissent movements in Northeast are related to the ethnic identity assertion. Whether it is the Kukis, whether it is the various groups in Assam like the Dimasas, the Karbis, they want to, or the Bodos, they want to assert their ethnic identity, and sufficient leeway has now been given to them. Hopefully they will be coming to this. Coming on to the Ulfa, Ulfa is again ethnic separatist ideology is there. And I think Ulfa is going to continue to have impact or continue to foster its insurgency in some way or the other. And mind you, Ulfa has got very close links with China. And that is where the challenge comes. But that does not mean that Ulfa can start the insurgency all over again and create challenges for India in the Northeast. That situation does not arise. It will take a lot of time, as China will, even if the Chinese assistance is not going to come about. So I think that is where the aspect comes as far as the level of insurgency in the Northeast. I think important aspect is that the management of insurgency by the security forces, I'm saying the army, the Assam Rifles, and the police, paramilitary forces, has got us to this day. Today, our police and paramilitary forces are highly capable. You find that the police and paramilitary have achieved success in Naxal-affected zones, central India. No army were deployed there, but the police and paramilitary have achieved success. So, in case of a war, I am quite confident that the line of communications in Northeast will be fully protected by the police, and so that the army will be released for the operational purposes. Now, if you come on to the aspect of Armed Forces Special Power Act, as the chair has highlighted. Now, let me be very clear. Armed Forces Special Powers Act is not something which is demanded by the army. It is never demanded by the army, but it is required by the army if it is to operate in the insurgency affected areas as per our constitution. The Constitution of India does not allow the armed forces to operate in an area independently. They have to operate under the civil authority. The minimum authority for opening of a fire in a civil area by the armed forces, except for self-defense, is an executive magistrate. All of you know who the executive magistrate is. It is at least the district or the deputy district magistrate who's there, who's nominated as an executive magistrate. Otherwise, it is only the deputy commissioner who can order the fire. Now, in an insurgency area or a disturbed area, as they call it, if you want the armed forces to operate, then the Armed Forces Special Power Act has to be invoked. It is only then the armed forces can even carry out whatever normal movement they are going to do. So the first requirement is the disturbed area. Who declares the disturbed area? It is the state government. Today, state governments are very reluctant to avoid declaring a state as a to repeal the disturbed area. The situation in Assam 1 year back, Ministry of Home Affairs told the Assam government that you repeal the Disturbed Area Act. They didn't do it. As a result, the Armed Forces Special Power Act has to be continued. So the point is that the Armed Forces Special Power Act and the Armed Forces per se is two different aspects, as it is not the right of the armed, or it is not the interest of the armed forces that this should operate. But then we should very much understand that if you want the armed forces to operate, Armed Forces Special Power Act has to be there. The other aspect of Armed Forces Special Power Act is that there can be excesses. And I'm not trying to shield the armed forces. There have been excesses. Even in the recent case, the voting issue, there have been certain, though the inquiry is still going, but on the face of it, there are some issues which are coming up and which are very obvious. So the incorrect application of ASPA is a problem. The armed forces are very much aware of it, and the armed forces commanders are taking strict action against those who violate it. And I'm quite confident that as and when this issue of voting thing comes up, court of inquiry, whatever this comes up, if the armed forces are to be blamed, they will be taken to task. So that is the second aspect of ASPA, and these two aspects have to be understood by us. The civil society normally focuses on the second aspect. That is certain incidents where the armed forces act has been violated, but in each and every case, there is a proper investigation is undertaken. And as you know, in Impal, when the big agitation took place, after that, the Armed Forces Special Power Act has been repealed for the Impal city zone. So corrective action has been taken when required. But civil human rights groups try to focus on the first aspect, rather the second aspect. First aspect is also very, very important. Now coming on to the last aspect of mine, that how to avoid the two-front or the half-front emerging in the north. Yes, the situation in our country, because of the socio-economic aspects, because of the various underlying resentment against the constitution, whether it is genuine or not, is not a question of dispute here, but people have got their dissenting views. So under these circumstances, one has to be always guarded that today what I'm talking of a zero front war in Northeast does not emerge one. And for that, our intelligence and surveillance grid, both external and internal, have to be very strong. I think if you have a strong internal and external surveillance grid, today I think we have got that capabilities, which are technological, human as well. I think it can be effectively engaged. The second is the political linkages. The political interventions today have to be in such a way to integrate the people. Look, development is not the only way to integrate the people. We have a sense of that if we make the roads, if we make give them water, etc. No. They are looking at the political and socio-economic integration. And that's where the NSC and IM demand comes for flag and constitution. Whether it is right or wrong, it's not a debate here, but that is a demand. And unless they get that demand, they're not going to come up. And if this generation of leadership goes, another generation will come up. We should not hope that the next generation will weaken their demand. It's not likely to happen. So political integration, socio-economic integration is more important. And as Mr. Harjeet has brought out, he went and lived with them. Whereas how many of us go and live with the Northeast or go there? So this, I think that aspect is very, very important and which we have to look at. Then, of course, we have to earmark the forces if required to deployment in case the situation gets worse, which I don't think will get worse, at least in the 1 to 2 to 3 years. And the contingency planning has to be carried. But most important of this is political and socio-economic integration is lacking. Development is not the only answer. If you do that, Northeast will not remain a half-front war as the organizers claim it is. It's not a half-front war, as I highlighted, because the ability of China to trigger any violence is not there. It's not there at present. They could have done in the 1970s, 60s. Lastly, I would highlight the challenge which is coming from Myanmar. Today, as you know, after the Myanmar coup 1 year back, the situation on the frontiers in Myanmar has become very, very sensitive. The Northeast groups who have got their sanctuaries in Myanmar, they have joined the Myanmar Tatmada or Myanmar army, and Myanmar army is actually taking their assistance for carrying out counter operations in Myanmar area itself. So they are the Northeast groups who are operating in Myanmar, they are definitely likely to get a fillip after this activity. And so we have to keep a situation on watch. And also we have to reach out to the Myanmar army that how much of a leeway they are giving to this group. Because if they are bolstered, if they are given arms, they are given much encouragement, they are going to operate across the borders, if not tomorrow, but day after. So I think that is a very important factor which is involved. The second aspect is the Chin. If you see the Chin state in Myanmar, there is a huge civil war sort of a situation which is going on in the Chin state, which will affect Mizoram, because Mizos and Chins have got very ethnic identity commonality. And due to this factor, already about 30,000 refugees have come from Chin state to Mizoram. So this is another aspect which will have to be watched out as far as the Myanmar situation is concerned. And in case we are able to do this, I think we should be able to sort of gain much and overcome this so-called fear of a half-front war in Northeast in the future as well. Thank you very much, sir, for the patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those remarks. Now, may I request Ms. Desai to give her remarks on the case of illegal Bangladesh and Rohingya immigration and its impact. We are, 20-25 minutes, because then we will be very short of time for question answers. So if you can do it earlier, that'll be that much better.
Namaskar and good afternoon. To begin with, let me say that I would, it's such an honor and such a privilege for me to be here amongst all of you today. And I have to extend my gratitude to Indic Researchers Forum for giving me this opportunity to speak at a gathering like this. And to all my seniors here who have given me the opportunity to present my thoughts on a region that I have been studying for a very long time now. A region that is so complex and has remained, in my opinion, absent from our collective national consciousness until fairly recently. And of course, to my session chair, General Bhadoria. When I was asked to be a part of this conference, I immediately agreed, primarily because I know I learned so much from my eminent co-panelists, but also because of the topic of illegal migration in and through the Northeast is so very important to not just, the region, but the rest of the country as well, because the Northeast is like, unlike any other part of the country, with a very, very precarious geographical location. Of course, I will try to wrap this up as quickly as possible, but, just the scope of this area, illegal migration is just so huge. And then I have directions to speak about the Rohingyas as well, but I will do my best. But, as all of you know, that Bangladesh and India share an international border that's almost over 4,000 kilometers long, and it's the fifth longest land border in the world, and most of these borders have been porous for a really long time. The same goes for the Indo-Myanmar border, in Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh. And to add to this precarious position that geographically we put ourselves in, it is connected to the rest of the country through, again, and I don't think this is debatable, through a very, very ill-advised 21-kilometer wide Chicken's Neck. Therefore, just the positioning of this region makes it vulnerable to, all sorts of illegal migration. But like I said, as today my topic is specifically on Bangladeshi illegal immigration and the Rohingyas, and their social political impact, I'd like to sort of divide this talk into two parts. Because both these illegal immigrations are equally important to analyze, but it's a huge range. So due to the limitation of time, I will only use Assam as an example. This is a huge region. It impacts every different state in, different ways, but we don't have to the time to deep dive into that. So I'll divide this presentation and bring in a little security perspective to the Rohingya issue as well. To begin with, we know that illegal immigration from Bangladesh has been part of a political discourse in northeastern region for a really long time. And India has time to time raised this issue with its counterparts in Bangladesh. But Bangladesh has refused to accept that there are Bangladeshis that illegally migrate into India. India obviously has held on to a pushback policy, and that's resulted in tensions. But, given the political salience and the reverberations in towards the political aspect of Bangladesh, of what they are going to, how it's going to impact them if they accept that there are illegal immigrants going to India, is something that I don't think that they're ready for. And I think Awami League or the BNP are not ready to accept this. It creates hurdles for them. It creates hurdles politically. So this is a long-standing issue that has not been resolved. On the contrary, let me tell you, recently I was on a talk and we had some very senior intellectuals from Bangladesh who have written about radicalization and security threats, who were unwilling to accept that there was illegal immigration into the northeastern region, or that previously groups like NLFD in Tripura had been trained by ISI in Bangladesh, which I found absolutely ludicrous. But this is the stance that they take. And, this is one issue where civil groups, intellectuals, as well as the government come together in Bangladesh, and they maintain an absolute silence on it. If they're prodded at the most, they'll deny it, but in private, they will agree to it. Some even go to the extent of arguing that actually there is migration coming from India into Bangladesh. And I think that is, again, something that is without any basis. Anyhow, notwithstanding the Assam Accord, the issue of illegal migration still remains a problem. And there's I'm sure all of you have read Sanjay Hazarika, who, put this very well. He said, what we see now is we are visibly reshaping and transforming the demographic, ethnic, linguistic, religious profile of large parts of the population in these areas. And what it has done is it has stirred a potent brew of hatred or suspicion or fear of the other. And as we know that the Supreme Court of India in 2005 scrapped the IMDT Act, and incidentally that act was only applicable to Assam and not to any other parts of the country. And Lieutenant General Sinha at that time, who was the governor of Assam, had sent a report to the president, the then president, in which he'd written that there is a huge influx of illegal migrants, and it's turning lower Assam districts into a Muslim majority region. Now, we have to understand the nuances here. I think that was really visionary of him to see that, because that has become the on-ground reality. But when they talk about areas becoming into Muslim majority regions, they're not talking about the indigenous Assamese Muslims who live there, who have been very well integrated, who are culturally, traditionally the same as they're very different to the immigrants that are coming in, and very similar to the indigenous populations there because they are indigenous themselves. When they talk about this sort of demographic change, they're talking about the new demographic change. And there are a lot of analysts who have recognized this trend, where they've realized that Assam has, previously seen huge amount of demographic change in areas like Barpeta, Dhubri, or Karimganj. Now, of course, pretty much all of Lower Assam. Having said that, illegal immigration has internal dynamics within Assam, and that those dynamics are making even the Assamese Muslims feel marginalized by the migrants from Bangladesh. Radical parties like AIUDF, have expanded their they've expanded their support base to include some local Muslims as well, and the Bengali Muslims also. So, this is creating little fault lines where there weren't any before. And unfortunately, it's also true that many illegal migrants from Bangladesh possess ration cards and other documents due to the nexus, long-standing nexus that has been there between the officials and vested interests, which have wanted to win them over as vote banks. And the non-acceptance again of this issue by Bangladesh has only led, unfortunately, to the exploitation of these poor immigrants. There have been enough accounts of these immigrants being trafficked, women and children being trafficked further on. But like I said, for them, they turn a blind eye to it. They're quoting figures without giving a source of their data collection, saying that, there are 500,000 Indians in Bangladesh, to counter this argument that remittances from the money that they earn in Bangladesh is to the tune of over 3,700 million US dollars, which completely is ridiculous. And this almost seems like a concerted effort to counter our allegation of illegal migration. Because, honestly, if there were these many migrants there, if they were making that kind of money there, that means they'd be sending back home, by basic calculation, over $7,000. The Reserve Bank of India, which keeps records of these remittances, has no sort of records of this sort of money coming in. Anyway, the ground reality, what is happening there, is very evident. I don't think it is debatable. Demographic change, most of the Bangladeshi immigrants have got their names enlisted in the voting list illegally, so thereby they start claiming themselves as citizens of the state. On a recent trip to Assam, I met some very top serving officers, and they said that the demography has changed so acutely from 12%, something like that, to in 1901 to nearly 40% in 2021. And, these are the records that they have. There must be so many under the radar. But, having said that this demographic change has the ability to impact about 80% of the about 80 constituency seats very soon. And according to reports again, Bangladesh origin Muslims have a blueprint to capture 3 to 5 constituencies every election. Still, they are a majority political stakeholder by 2050. There is actually a blueprint, and this is intelligence records that have been quoted by the Chief Minister. The Chief Minister has even said that the illegal encroachment in areas like Dholpur in Darang district was part of the plan to take control of the Sipajhar Vidhan Sabha constituency. He said that almost 6,000 of the 10,000 people in that area did not have their names in the preliminary list of the National Register of Citizens. Again, when you look at, on the hand, culture, this has an impact on the culture as well. Already the culture of the people of the Northeast, especially in Assam, is seen as being under threat with the encroachment of the Satras land by illegal immigrants, which there is a new clearance program that's just started, but I don't know how successful that's going to be. But Satras is the soul of Assam. It has also been observed that there is absolutely no attempt of these illegal immigrants in integrating with the indigenous populations, which at the end of the day then ends up creating not just communal tensions, but also ghettoization. There's also been news of not just cases of love jihad, where young indigenous girls have been trafficked to the Middle East, but lately a new phenomenon of land jihad is coming to the fore, where a lot of these illegal immigrants are marrying tribal girls with a focus on the land reserved for them. Large areas of forest land, wasteland has also been occupied. I remember about 12 or 14 years ago visiting Kaziranga, where there were already large tracts that were occupied, and statistics say that the state experienced declining % of land area under forest from 39. Sorry?
No, please go on. Please go on. I think there's somebody who got it.
So, I was saying that the state experienced declining % of land under forest from 39% in 1951-52 to about 30% or less now. So, this is an ongoing issue. It has huge impacts on a state like Assam, which already is in a crisis when it comes to protection of their own identity. And there seems to be some hope, but I will come to that a little later. But till then, allow me to shift your focus to the Rohingya issue, something that is a little bit different from the Bangladeshi illegal immigration issue, And it's interesting because it's really captured a lot of people's imagination. It's been in the limelight. There's been a lot of support for the Rohingyas and the exodus from Myanmar. And it's received a lot of sympathy. To begin with, I think what is important to understand with the Rohingya issue is that around the issue around the Rohingyas, we need to understand the history of their existence in Myanmar, which has been very, very problematic. The Rohingyas and the Myanmaris have been at odds for a long time. And as a matter of fact, the Myanmaris don't even recognize the term Rohingya, let alone recognizing them as indigenous. They call themselves Bengali because it's largely, they believe that it's a colonial, post-colonial construct wherein when East Pakistan came to being, they thought that the Arakan state would become a part of East Pakistan. When that did not happen, this is again what the Myanmaris say, that they tried to conflate their history with that of the original Arakan Muslims to propagate a separatist agenda. Now, the Arakan Muslims are called Kamans, so they think of themselves as different to the Rohingyas and so on. But after the partition of India, and when this did not happen as they expected it to, some of the leaders of the Rohingyas created the Mujahid Party. And this Mujahid Party was essentially created to make a separate autonomous Islamic state in Arakan. And it was in the 1950s, they say, that they started using the term Rohingya to establish a distinct identity and identify themselves as indigenous. And of course, we have such eminent panelists here. And, you would have all heard about Operation Dragon King, which was in the late 1970s and was conducted by the Tatmadaw and the immigration officials, particularly to register citizens in Northern Arakan and expel so-called foreigners from the national census as well. And when this happened, a huge amount of Rohingyas moved to Bangladesh. There are different records of how many they were, but the Myanmarese government itself says there were about 150,000 Rohingyas that moved to Bangladesh. There was a mass exodus, but not all of them moved to Bangladesh. A lot of them moved to Karachi as well. Therefore, we have to understand that most of the Myanmarese population, especially Buddhist majority, ended up feeling that they don't belong to this country. They almost used this argument that the fact that they naturally moved back to Bangladesh or went to Karachi means that they were never a part of Myanmar to begin with. And, and also to sort of add to the issues, the fact that, and to add to the fault lines that had already been created, the existence of Rohingya separatist groups, just completely raised the tensions. But these skirmishes, of course, went on. But what is important to us as Indians is we have to remember that these were not skirmishes and conflict between, the Burmese and the Rohingyas. The Rohingya insurgents attacked border security forces, and that's when we started hearing of ARSA. ARSA was the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. And this army, a lot of experts have said, has a lot of militant connections, maybe with Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. But having said that, what's important to us is to understand that there were attacks against Hindu villages as well. In 2017, there were a bunch of Hindu villages. It was a cluster known as Kha Mongse in Mongdao. And please forgive my pronunciation. But sadly, 100 Bengali Hindu villagers were massacred. The Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, ARSA, was held responsible for this. Mass graves were discovered. 45 Hindus, mostly women and children, were there. Their remains were discovered in these graves. Women who escaped this attack said the only reason that they escaped is because the insurgents wanted to marry them and they wanted them to convert. So they converted. And they were taken then with some children to a village and made to eat rice and meat. These are all very well reported facts. Were made to eat rice and meat, which was against their Hindu beliefs. And then subsequently they were brought to refugee camps and forced to wear burqas. There was a lot of internal displacement. Thousands of Hindus fled. They say that over 3,000 Hindus were internally displaced. Many fled to Bangladesh. But they allege that they had been attacked by ARSA. Now, the reason I give this history of the Rohingyas is because the word refugee word can be very misleading. It naturally elicits a response of persecution, empathy, innocence. But the fact is, I feel that it is clear that the Rohingyas have been infiltrated by radicalized groups, and saying it's not all of them, but only some of them, is a very defeatist way of looking at things. Because at the end of the day, these groups have identified leaders and people who they follow and their decision makers. And, if the decision makers are radicalized, the rest will follow suit. Now, just like how even from refugee camps in Bangladesh, the Rohingya refugee camps, there have been reports that the presence of arms and drugs trade has increased exponentially. Indian agencies themselves have issued warnings to the country's armed forces, which I'm sure all of you know about, that ISI is involved in providing training to Rohingya in Cox's Bazar. They are providing training through Jamaat ul Mujahideen of Bangladesh, JMB. It's also reported that ISI provided JMB with the first installment of 10 million takas that was funneled through Saudi Arabia and Malaysia for the training of these people. Further, HIB, Hifazat-e-Islam Bangladesh, IOB, Islami Andolan Bangladesh in the erstwhile East Pakistan, these formations have re-emerged, and they have deep rooted connections, ideological connections with radicalized organizations in India like PFI. Intelligence reports have said that HIB, IOB are working inside Bangladesh as overground activists for Al-Qaeda or other ISIS-related organizations such as JMB or ABT, so there are all these connections through which one has to view as to how much of this is how much of this is going to impact our country, our national security, and finally also our national identity. The intelligence report that I was mentioning had also said that India's intelligence agencies fear that these terrorists will be pushed into their country from Bangladesh after Pakistan has failed to do so through the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, because after the revocation of Article 370, situations may have changed for them. It might not be as easy as it had been before. So it seems like the northeastern frontier is a good area for them to infiltrate with, and at least the intelligence reports say that. Now, they've also.
Ma'am, can I request you to wind up soon? Because
All right.
thank you.
All right. So give me 2 minutes.
Okay,
So, the Rohingyas, have been found in many, many areas. So they've been found in, the northeast, of course, but they've been found traveling. So a lot of them have been caught coming back from Aligarh for what reason, I don't know. But a lot of them have been caught traveling to Kerala, New Delhi, and other areas like that. And, it's really not very complicated for us to understand why the northeast, which is, which has ethnic conflicts, and now possibly with a lot of settlements has more overground insurgents than underground, a Sulfa-like situation may or may not be possible, but it's definitely something to think about. And I would just like to, as I'm running out of time, I'd just like to say that at the end of the day, I don't think we are really in a terrible position now. It seems like the NRC and the hullabaloo around the illegal immigrants has become a bit of a deterrent, because they know that they will be identified. So the influx has slowed down a little bit. Also, the kind of measures that have been taken by the governments on border areas, whether it's surveillance, whether it's fencing, whether it's door-to-door identification, this has all limited the kind of influx of immigration that we are seeing. So I think there's still light at the end of the tunnel, but to conclude, I'd like to say that there is a huge amount of impact that's already happened, and it's something that we need to continuously keep our eye on. And one last point I'd like to make is that we have to also keep our eye on Bangladesh, because there is a deficit of a democratic opposition in Bangladesh. We know that it hasn't taken much to topple governments there. So just because we have a friendly government today doesn't mean, and a government that strikes hard on terror activities doesn't mean that that government is going to last. So I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and on Bangladesh as well. Thank you.
Come to the end of speakers' initial remarks. Now, I would, anyone, in case he has questions, they can raise their hands. I can see Mahesh Kaul raising his hand. So please go on, Mahesh.
Good afternoon. It was a pleasure listening to all the panelists. I have a simple submission with the due permission of the chair that the topic is quite apt. It is 2.5 front war exactly. And there was a very sweeping statement made by Brigadier Rahul Bhonsle that it is not a 2.5 front war. But I would like beg to differ here, because war is not only what you fight on the ground with weapons and all that. It's the capturing of the mind space as well. We have seen what happened in Jammu and Kashmir, how this subversion affects the minds. So the forms of war have changed. I would go to the extent of saying that it's not a 2.5 front war, it's a 3 front war. 2, we know. 3rd, it's evangelical intrusions, jihadi subversion, Chinese imperialism acting in tandem to dismantle and strike to make India balkanized. So my simple submission is that we are facing a very different kind of a war. We said in the last so many years that it's proxy war going on in Jammu and Kashmir. It's a denial. It was not a proxy war. It was war by other means. It's a war by other means meant to balkanize India. So the enemy is using cost-benefit tactics in warfare. And these things, this subversive war is a more vicious kind of war that we must inject into our defense policies, defense architecture, national security grid. So please don't be in that illusion that it's not a 2.5 front war. I must go to the extent of saying it's a 3-front war. Subversive war is the new reality for new India. So, and instruments of the Indian state are being used to wreck the Indian nation from within. We have seen how dismantlization of Himalayas has taken place in Jammu and Kashmir over the years, how internal displacements have taken place. And Rohingyas, they have come down to Jammu and Kashmir as well. It's a spillover. How the demographics are being changed and the societies turned subversive. I can give you n number of cases in Jammu. So please, it's my hand-folded request to all the veterans and strategists sitting here, don't trivialize it. It's a 3-front war. And please take this head on and factor these inputs into the defense planning. Thank you very much.
Sir, Bhosle sir, would you like to respond, or can I take more questions and comments? And then in the last, this thing you could, all the
whatever ways I'll do that. Whatever ways convenient.
So, because we are short of time, so what I'll do?
Sure. No problem.
And then your last comments, you could answer that.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyone else, please? I can't see any hands, sir. So, Bhosle sir, you could respond to that. Brigadier Bhosle sir?
Yeah, can you
you
hear me,
respond to that because there are no more questions.
Right. My response to it is very simple. Firstly, India is not such a weak state that every sort of a diversionary tactics, some sort of a subversion. In fact, Mr. Mahesh himself said, this is a subversion. It's not a war. You see, one must understand. Let me just give a parallel example. If you go to a doctor, the doctor diagnoses your symptoms. Now, it's very important for the doctor to diagnose your symptoms correctly. Now, if the doctor diagnoses you as a COVID-19, fine. If the doctor diagnoses you as flu, it has happened in many cases. Doctor diagnoses flu. So, correct diagnosis is very important. And sir, my humble submission to Mr. Mahesh, please do not categorize every situation as a war-like situation, particularly for a country like India. We are a strong nation. These sort of diversionary tactics will keep happening. We should not get concerned about that. And particularly the Northeast, there is no war-like situation in Northeast at present. I have already presented the facts to you. But still to keep calling it war, I think war can only be waged by the armed forces. It's a violent struggle. You go to the dictionary and see it. Today the fashion is everything is war. Media war, cyber war. Hell, what the hell are we trying to prove? And we are not a small nation. This is no small nation. India is a very strong nation. We can very well contest, and we have contested this for the last 75 years, sir. All this type of diversionary sort of influences, and we will contest in the year ahead. Important to categorize war so that the armed forces capability generation is focused on war. And the other elements which are there, as many eminent speakers have brought out, like drugs, etc., this is not war. These are the criminal type of activities. Please do not get away with this. Otherwise, you will have a confused military, you will have a confused political leadership, you will be investing in the wrong places, and you will be diagnosing Omicron as flu, and the poor chap will, sort of collapse. So that's my only humble submission with you. But you can continue with your ideas and etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I just wish to make a very short comment. We heard that the leadership is old of most of these groups. Somebody in the age group of 85, 90 leading these groups. However, the cadre is very young and they are aspirational cadre. So what do they need? They need jobs and things like that. The second point that I wish to highlight is in complete Northeast, the education standards are very high. The percentage of education is in the region of 85 to 90, right? So what do we need to do? We need to create jobs. And this is something which came out in everybody's comments. Just to give you an example, in 2015, when the framework agreement was signed, there was a talk that there might be the NSC and IM cadre might be absorbed in the either police or armed forces. There are reports that a lot of young people joined this cadre so that they could benefit by joining, say, police or even army. So that kind of or those are the aspirations of the youth there. So I did not hear much about the economic development because that is something which would remove some of the ills of Northeast. And in that, the first thing that comes to my mind is connectivity. Connectivity is absolutely poor in Northeast. We are now making roads and airports. The skill development, the people have to be skilled to do something, right? Then the resources are lacking. This is a very poor region. Resources, even if they are there, they have to be taken out. And then the marketing has to be provided for the goods that are produced there. Now, can all this be done by the private sector? No. The government has to step in. The government must create the basic infrastructure for the economic activity to kick in and take place. So this is what would be my comment. And in case any of the panelists they wish to comment, make their last comment, please do so. Otherwise, then we will close the session.